Count Dooku was not always the infamous Sith Lord known as Darth Tyrannus. He began his life on the planet Sereno, born into the noble house of Dooku, one of the wealthiest and most powerful aristocratic families in the galaxy. From a young age, he displayed a remarkable sensitivity to the Force, which quickly drew the attention of the Jedi Order. Like many Force-sensitive children, Dooku was taken from his family at an early age, though unlike most, his noble heritage and his parents' complex views on the Jedi left a lasting impact on his psyche. Dooku's early life in the Jedi Temple was marked by discipline, intellect, and a natural affinity for the Force. His instructors quickly recognized his potential. He was a proud, determined student who took to the lightsaber with an elegance that bordered on artistry. Dooku became one of the most formidable duelists the Order had ever seen, a master of the Makashi form, which emphasized precision, economy of motion, and a deep understanding of fencing-like combat. While admired, he was also feared by his peers for his intensity and the sense that he always held back a part of himself, never fully surrendering to the ideals of the Order. Dooku's most influential years came under the mentorship of Jedi Master Thame Cerulean. Cerulean was a wise and respected Jedi who believed in deep study of galactic history and the true nature of the Force. Under his tutelage, Dooku gained not only physical strength but also a deep philosophical understanding of the galaxy's moral complexities. He learned to question rather than blindly obey. Cerulean's own disillusionment with aspects of the Republic seeped into Dooku's consciousness. The boy who once believed in the Jedi as beacons of peace began to see cracks in their doctrines. As he grew older, Dooku's prowess became legendary. He completed his training and achieved the rank of Jedi Knight, later rising to Jedi Master and even taking his own Padawan, none other than Qui-Gon Jinn. Dooku's relationship with Qui-Gon was a complicated one. Though he cared deeply for his apprentice and respected his independence, he often struggled with Qui-Gon's tendency to follow the living Force rather than the teachings of the Council. Still, Qui-Gon admired Dooku and adopted many of his views, particularly his skepticism of authority. Throughout his time as a Jedi Master, Dooku took on various missions for the Republic. These included negotiations, peacekeeping efforts, and armed interventions. But over time, he became increasingly disillusioned with the Galactic Senate and the corruption festering within it. He saw politicians enriching themselves, corporations growing more powerful, and the Jedi being used as tools of an ineffective and self-serving government. Each mission seemed to confirm his suspicions that the Republic was in decline, perhaps beyond saving. Despite his frustrations, Dooku remained within the Order for many years, though his rhetoric became more impassioned and even dangerous to some. He began studying Jedi prophecies and ancient teachings that were no longer considered part of the mainstream Jedi philosophy. He researched the Sith, not out of interest in joining them but to understand their rise and fall. He studied the failures of the Republic throughout history, and all of it fed into a growing belief that the current system needed to be replaced. The death of Qui-Gon Jinn during the events of the Phantom Menace deeply affected Dooku. Though they had grown somewhat distant, Qui-Gon was the last tether he had to his remaining idealism. With his passing and the Jedi Council's unwillingness to investigate the Sith threat thoroughly, Dooku finally made the decision to leave the Jedi Order. His departure shocked many and was seen as a great loss. He returned to Sereno and reclaimed his title as Count. Though he publicly cited disillusionment with the Republic and the Jedi, in secret, Dooku had already begun to form an alliance with a shadowy figure, the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, who was secretly Chancellor Palpatine. Seduced by Sidious's vision of a new galactic order and frustrated by the inaction of the Jedi, Dooku fell to the dark side and became Darth Tyrannus. His fall was not sudden or marked by explosive rage, but a slow erosion of faith, guided by logic, ambition, and a belief that he alone could restore balance. As Darth Tyrannus, Dooku set in motion a series of events that would plunge the galaxy into chaos. One of his first major actions was commissioning the creation of a clone army in secret. Working through Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, Dooku ensured that the Kaminoans would create an army for the Republic, even as he himself began assembling the confederacy of independent systems to rebel against it. He recruited disillusioned systems, star systems ruled by corporate entities like the Trade Federation and the Techno-Union, and galvanized them into open rebellion. In truth, Both the clone army and the separatists were pawns in the larger scheme of Darth Sidious, designed to give the Sith control over both sides of the coming conflict. Dooku, whether fully aware or not, was now a key instrument in the execution of the Sith grand plan. During this period, Dooku trained his own apprentice in the dark side, the assassin Asajj Ventress. Though not a true Sith, Ventress was a powerful Force user trained in the ways of the dark side. Her presence allowed Dooku to carry out missions and assassinations while maintaining a degree of separation from the more openly violent aspects of the war. Their relationship was complex, marked by mutual use and eventual betrayal. Dooku saw Ventress as disposable, a tool rather than a partner. This would eventually come back to haunt him when she turned against him, seeking revenge for his abandonment. At the same time, Dooku played the role of political leader, statesman, and war commander. He became the face of the separatist movement, promising to free the galaxy from corruption and restore dignity to systems oppressed by the Republic. Many believed in his cause, unaware of his true allegiance to the Sith. Throughout the Clone Wars, Dooku orchestrated numerous attacks and political maneuvers designed to prolong the conflict. He manipulated both allies and enemies alike, often pitting them against each other for his own gain. His ultimate goal, however, remained the same: to destroy the Jedi and remake the galaxy under Sith rule. As his power grew, Dooku also became more dangerous. He dueled Jedi Masters in open combat, killing some and wounding others. He remained one of the most skilled lightsaber duelists in the galaxy, rivaled only by the likes of Yoda and Mace Windu. His encounter with Yoda during the Battle of Geonosis showcased not only his raw power but also his cunning, as he escaped rather than face defeat. Geonosis also marked the true beginning of the Clone Wars, and Dooku's role in that battle was critical. He had manipulated events to bring the Jedi and the Republic into a full-scale war, ensuring that the Sith plan continued as intended. Over time, Dooku began to see himself not just as a servant of Sidious but as a potential ruler in his own right. He envisioned a future where he would overthrow Sidious and take his place as the Sith Master, ruling the galaxy with his own apprentice. This ambition was not unknown to Sidious, who viewed Dooku as a means to an end. Dooku's final downfall began when Sidious introduced a new potential apprentice, Anakin Skywalker, though Dooku did not immediately recognize. After Count Dooku's death at the hands of Anakin Skywalker, the galaxy continued to reel from the war he helped orchestrate. Though his life had ended, his influence persisted in countless ways. The separatist movement he led did not dissolve immediately. General Grievous took control of the droid army and continued fighting the Republic, unaware that Dooku's demise signaled a major shift in the Sith grand plan. Dooku's absence created a vacuum at the top of the separatist hierarchy, and many of the corporate leaders who once looked to him for guidance were now exposed to the machinations of Darth Sidious, who played both sides of the war with ruthless precision. As war raged on, Dooku's legacy evolved into a cautionary tale among the Jedi. Once considered one of their greatest, his fall from grace was now used as a grim reminder of how even the most disciplined and powerful could be consumed by darkness. The Council reflected on the signs they had missed, the warnings they had ignored, and how their strict adherence to dogma had failed to prevent one of their own from turning into a Sith Lord. Within the Jedi Temple, debates intensified about the role of emotion, political neutrality, and the Jedi's growing distance from the people they claimed to serve. Dooku had argued for years that the Order had become too closely aligned with a corrupt Republic, and in many ways, his warnings proved true. While his methods were twisted and his allegiance to Sidious brought ruin, the core concerns he raised were never without merit. That moral complexity left some Jedi, particularly those like Anakin and Ahsoka Tano, questioning the very foundations of their beliefs. Dooku's past as a respected Jedi Master became difficult to reconcile with his later role as a warmonger and Sith Lord. His story didn't fit neatly into the binaries the Jedi liked to maintain. He wasn't a madman or a brute. He was thoughtful, articulate, and motivated by ideals that were once noble. That dissonance haunted the Order and played a role in its eventual downfall. At the same time, much of Dooku's secret work came to light only after his death. His dealings with the Kaminoans, his assassination orders carried out by Asajj Ventress and Savage Opress, and his involvement in the creation of the clone army all pointed to a deeply intricate web of deception. Some Jedi began to suspect that Sifo-Dyas, the Jedi officially credited with commissioning the clone army, had not acted alone. In time, Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi would uncover more details, realizing that Dooku had not only betrayed the Jedi but had engineered one of the greatest military traps in galactic history. The army he helped create was the very instrument of the Jedi's eventual destruction. Order 66, embedded in the clone's behavioral programming, was activated by Darth Sidious to annihilate the Jedi. Dooku had laid the groundwork for this outcome, perhaps never fully realizing how complete the purge would be. Whether he believed the Jedi would be exterminated or simply forced into exile is uncertain, but by the time of his death, the wheels were already in motion. Dooku's manipulation of the Force itself also remained a subject of study and fear. While he did not possess the raw power of Sidious or the unrestrained fury of Anakin, Dooku's control and finesse made him uniquely dangerous. He was a duelist without peer, a political mind capable of uniting hundreds of star systems, and a Sith Lord who valued knowledge and planning over brute force. His mastery of Force lightning and his ability to dominate lesser minds were only surface aspects of his deeper understanding of the dark side. Dooku believed the Force was not inherently light or dark, but rather a tool to be wielded by those strong and wise enough to do so. This pragmatic view, bordering on heresy to the Jedi, shaped how he trained his apprentices and how he ruled the separatists. He did not see himself as evil. To the very end, Dooku believed he was the hero of his own story. Among those closest to him, the echoes of his influence endured. Asajj Ventress, after being betrayed by Dooku, forged her own path, one that took her from vengeance to reluctant redemption. She came to see her master for what he truly was, calculating, manipulative, and ultimately loyal only to power. Yet she could not deny that her strength had been forged in his shadow. Similarly, Savage Opress, another of Dooku's would-be apprentices, was created through dark alchemy to serve as a weapon. But like so many others, he became expendable when Dooku saw greater opportunity elsewhere. These failed apprentices, these discarded pawns, highlighted Dooku's willingness to use people as tools in pursuit of his vision. Beyond personal relationships, Dooku's political ideals continued to resonate. Many separatist leaders believed sincerely in the cause, not realizing it had been built on lies. Some hoped that with Dooku gone, peace could be negotiated. But they too were betrayed. One by one, they were hunted down by Darth Vader and executed in secret. The Confederacy of Independent Systems, once a massive coalition of planets and corporations, vanished overnight. Sidious had no more use for it. Dooku's dream of reforming the galaxy died with him, eclipsed by Sidious's vision of a tyrannical empire. Yet even this failure did not erase the truths that Dooku had pointed to. The Republic had been rotting from within, the Jedi were out of touch, and a new order had indeed risen, just not the one he had envisioned. In the years that followed, Emperor Palpatine rarely spoke of Dooku. He was a discarded chapter in the Sith lineage, a reminder of a plan fulfilled but not honored. Dooku was not given recognition, nor was he remembered as a martyr. To the Empire, he was a traitor, and to the few remaining Jedi, he was a fallen brother. Only in the secret of holocrons of the Sith and the lost records of the Jedi did his full story remain. Among the Force-sensitive elite, whispers of Dooku's path served as a warning about the dangers of disillusionment, ambition, and pride. But his legacy was also preserved in other, more hidden ways. On Serenno, his homeworld, the Dooku name became taboo. Once proud and respected, the House of Dooku fell into disgrace after his death. The people of Serenno were left to reconcile their aristocrat's transformation into a villain. Some remembered him as a visionary betrayed by the galaxy. Others cursed his name as the architect of war. Yet hidden among the ruins of his estate and the forgotten archives of the Separatist Council were documents, philosophies, and teachings that painted a more nuanced picture of the man. Dooku was never just a villain or just a hero. He was both, and neither. In later years, historians and Force scholars would revisit his life with greater objectivity. Works began to emerge that dissected his teachings, many of which were preserved in hidden Jedi records. Dooku's arguments about the Jedi's failures, while dismissed during his lifetime, gained traction among post-war thinkers. Particularly after the fall of the Empire and the rise of Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order, Dooku's insights were revisited. Luke, seeking to avoid the mistakes of the past, explored both Jedi and Sith teachings in order to understand the full spectrum of the Force. While he rejected Dooku's embrace of the dark side, he saw value in the Count's criticisms of Jedi dogma. Some of Dooku's writings, once forbidden, became part of Luke's wider curriculum for advanced students, used not to indoctrinate but to warn. Before he became Darth Tyrannus, Dooku's early years in the Jedi Order were marked not only by exceptional talent but also by a profound sense of questioning. Even as a youngling, he often asked questions that unsettled his instructors. He questioned the Order's decision to remove children from their families, he scrutinized the Council's strict codes, and he was skeptical of the Republic's political entanglements. These inquiries were not rooted in defiance but in a relentless pursuit of understanding. He wasn't content to follow the teachings blindly, he sought to understand their foundations and implications. It was this trait that made him a brilliant pupil but also a restless one. He craved knowledge in all forms, not just those deemed acceptable by the Jedi. His training under Master Thame Cerulean further fueled this intellectual fire. Cerulean was an outlier among Jedi, encouraging deep historical analysis and open philosophical debate. He taught Dooku to examine the Force not just as a power to be used, but as a phenomenon to be interpreted. Dooku became fascinated with the ancient history of the Sith and the cycles of conflict between light and dark. Though forbidden to study the Sith in depth, Dooku found ways to access archived materials, often rationalizing his actions as academic research. He learned of Darth Bane, the rule of two, and the belief that the dark side represented strength through passion and personal will. Though he did not embrace these ideas at the time, they left a mark on him, particularly the notion that the galaxy needed to be reshaped through power, not consensus. Dooku's missions as a Jedi Knight only deepened his dissatisfaction. Time and again, he was sent to worlds plagued by poverty, war, or tyranny, only to see the Republic do nothing of substance. He saw senators enrich themselves while ignoring the suffering of their constituents. He saw how the Jedi were used not as impartial peacekeepers but as agents of state power. These experiences hardened his views. He began writing essays and giving lectures within the temple, warning that the Jedi were becoming lapdogs of a corrupt Senate. While some agreed with him, especially younger Jedi who also felt the dissonance, many on the council grew wary of his tone. They feared that his critiques bordered on dangerous sedition. Dooku's relationship with the council frayed. He viewed them as stagnant, overly dogmatic, and too comfortable in their own privilege. The Jedi, he believed, had forgotten their original purpose: to serve the Force and the people of the galaxy. One of Dooku's most pivotal moments came during his negotiations on the planet Galadrin, where he led a Jedi strike against a group of Mandalorians allegedly responsible for a massacre. The mission ended in bloodshed. Dooku's forces killed many Mandalorians, but conflicting evidence later suggested that the intelligence had been manipulated. The Jedi had been misled into acting as executioners. Dooku was horrified by what had occurred and furious at the Council's unwillingness to investigate further. This event became a cornerstone of his growing belief that the Jedi were no longer in control of their own destiny. They were being manipulated by the Senate, by misinformation, and perhaps even by forces within the Order itself. He grew more reclusive and focused on his own studies, deepening his exploration of esoteric Force philosophy and galactic history. The seeds of his departure were being sown. Dooku's growing alienation found companionship in certain political circles. He began communicating with leaders of powerful systems, disillusioned with the Republic's failure to maintain order. Among them were the Trade Federation, the Techno-Union, and the Commerce Guilds. Though these groups were driven more by profit than principle, they found in Dooku a leader who could legitimize their grievances. In private, he also began receiving messages from a mysterious figure who identified himself as Darth Sidious. At first, Dooku was wary. He knew what it meant to associate with a Sith Lord. But as their conversations progressed, he found himself drawn to Sidious's vision. A new galactic order free from corruption, one where the strong could impose order and justice. Sidious played upon Dooku's frustrations and ambitions expertly. offering him not just an alliance but a role in reshaping the galaxy. When Dooku finally made the decision to leave the Jedi Order, it was not abrupt. He submitted a formal resignation, citing irreconcilable differences between Jedi values and Republic politics. His departure shocked many, especially those who still believed in his potential as a future member of the Jedi Council. But to Dooku, the Order was beyond redemption. He returned to Serenno, reclaiming his title as Count and reconnecting with his ancestral wealth. From there, he began assembling what would become the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Publicly, he positioned himself as a reformer, a noble statesman rallying systems that sought freedom from a decaying republic. Privately, he began his Sith training in earnest. Sidious named him Darth Tyrannus, and Dooku accepted the mantle. He did not consider it a fall but an evolution. He believed that through the dark side, he could achieve the power needed to restore balance and justice to the galaxy. One of Dooku's earliest and most consequential acts as Tyrannus was the recruitment of Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas into a plan to create an army. Sifo-Dyas had long believed that the Republic would soon face a massive conflict and that the Jedi were unprepared. Dooku exploited this fear and convinced Sifo-Dyas to secretly commission a clone army through the Kaminoans. After the order was placed, Dooku, under Sidious's orders, had Sifo-Dyas eliminated. He then erased all records of Kamino from the Jedi archives and personally oversaw the development of the clone army. This deception laid the foundation for the Clone Wars. At the same time, Dooku formed connections with the Night Sisters of Dathomir and eventually recruited Asajj Ventress as his dark side assassin. Trained in Sith techniques but never truly a Sith, Ventress served as a deadly enforcer, carrying out assassinations, espionage and sabotage across the galaxy. Her loyalty was constantly tested, and Dooku treated her with suspicion, always keeping her at arm's length. Ventress's eventual betrayal and the failed attempt to replace her with Savage Opress revealed cracks in Dooku's control. Though a master manipulator, he often underestimated the loyalty and agency of those he deemed beneath him. His relationships with his apprentices were marked by exploitation and expendability. In this, he mirrored his own master, Darth Sidious. As the Clone Wars escalated, Dooku became increasingly isolated. While he maintained the public image of a statesman and separatist leader, he spent more time in the shadows, coordinating with Sidious, orchestrating complex plots, and eliminating threats. He remained a formidable warrior, often facing Jedi in combat and emerging victorious. His skills with a lightsaber were unparalleled, and his command of the Force made him a match for even the greatest Jedi Masters. Every major decision made by the Confederacy bore his influence. From the deployment of battle droid forces to the manipulation of planetary governments, Dooku's hand was ever present. He understood that victory would not be achieved on battlefields alone. To him, the war was also a psychological and ideological struggle. He aimed to erode the Republic's legitimacy while portraying the separatists as victims of authoritarian control. Through well-produced propaganda, charismatic speeches, and staged Republic atrocities, Dooku won support from countless systems. The galaxy had become so fractured that many truly believed his version of events. What made Dooku uniquely dangerous was that he wasn't lying, at least, not entirely. The Republic was corrupt. The Jedi were compromised. These truths gave his movement a veneer of righteousness. Yet behind the idealism was a Sith Lord orchestrating chaos with surgical precision. Dooku's private meetings with Sidious often revealed how much of the war was being carefully staged. The battles were real. The deaths were real. But the outcomes were controlled to maximize fear and desperation. Dooku's enemies were chosen not for their threat to the separatist cause, but for their symbolic value. A Jedi general known for mercy would be targeted to demoralize the Order. A world that symbolized Republic unity would be attacked to sow division. Dooku wielded the war as an artist would a brush, each move a stroke in a larger composition of despair. Meanwhile, his actions further entrenched the dark side across the galaxy. Whole sectors were consumed by fear, betrayal, and hatred, amplifying the Sith's influence in the Force. During this time, Dooku continued to experiment with dark side teachings. He delved deeper into forbidden Sith texts, learned rituals from Night Sister magic, and even attempted to influence ancient Force relics for his own ends. While Sidious prized control and secrecy, Dooku pursued knowledge and mastery. He believed that the Sith should be scholars as well as rulers. He saw himself as the ideal Sith Lord, measured, cultured, and enlightened. But his increasing ambition began to cloud his judgment. He started to question Sidious's plan, not out of doubt, but out of arrogance. He believed the Sith legacy should culminate with him. This growing pride led him to consider betrayal, perhaps imagining that he could kill Sidious and take the mantle of Dark Lord for himself. But he waited, watching, calculating, never fully committing to rebellion. He still believed that Sidious might grant him greater power, perhaps a shared rule, perhaps the chance to mold the new empire in his image. However, Sidious had other plans. He viewed Dooku as a tool, one that had served its purpose. Anakin Skywalker was his true prize. Sidious wanted someone younger, stronger, and more malleable. Dooku's refined philosophy and sense of nobility were liabilities. He was too independent, too intelligent. He could not be fully controlled. And so, Sidious began laying the groundwork for Dooku's removal. He subtly encouraged Anakin's hatred toward Dooku, pushing the young Jedi toward the dark side. Dooku was aware of Anakin's growing power but underestimated the danger. He believed that, with proper manipulation, Anakin could be turned into an ally, or eliminated if necessary. He failed to see that Sidious had already chosen his replacement. The beginning of the end came during the Battle of Coruscant. As the separatists launched a surprise assault on the Republic capital, Dooku played a central role in orchestrating the attack. The goal was not to win, but to sow terror and force a confrontation between Anakin Skywalker and Count Dooku. Capturing Chancellor Palpatine, who was, of course, Sidious in disguise, was part of the ruse. Dooku appeared on General Grievous' command ship, prepared for what he believed would be a staged duel. Sidious had told him to hold back and allow Anakin to defeat him partially. It was all theater, designed to manipulate Anakin into embracing his darker instincts. Dooku was told he would survive and become part of a triumvirate ruling the new order. But Sidious lied. The moment Dooku knelt before a disarmed Anakin, expecting a capture, Sidious gave the order to kill him. Dooku's death was swift and brutal. In that moment, his entire world unraveled. He looked at Sidious, the man he had served for over a decade, and saw only cold betrayal. He realized too late that he had been nothing more than a stepping stone. His eyes met Anakin's, no longer the brash young knight he once dismissed but a vessel of raw fury. When Anakin severed his hands and then his head, Dooku died with shock, fear, and bitter recognition etched on his face. It was the ultimate irony. For all his brilliance, his strategy, his power, he had failed to see the one truth that mattered. The Sith destroy their own. He was never meant to rule. He was a pawn in Sidious's masterpiece. After his death, Dooku's name was erased from most public records. The Republic had no interest in preserving the legacy of a traitor. The Jedi, still reeling from the war and blind to Sidious's true identity, saw Dooku's end as a necessary victory. But some Jedi suspected that the story was more complex. They sensed that his fall was not entirely voluntary. Some even wondered whether Dooku had tried to warn them, in his own way. After the Jedi Purge and the rise of the Empire, these questions faded into obscurity. Dooku became a ghost, a cautionary tale of arrogance and ambition. Yet his influence lingered. The Clone Wars he helped create reshaped the galaxy forever. The Jedi Order was destroyed. The Republic became the Empire. Billions of lives were lost. Dooku had set fire to the galaxy, believing he could control the blaze. Instead, he was consumed by it. Historians who later uncovered fragments of his writings found a man deeply conflicted. In private journals recovered from Serenno, Dooku wrote of his disillusionment with the Jedi, his admiration for ancient Sith philosophy, and his hope for a galaxy governed by order and reason. He never viewed himself as evil. He believed the Jedi were blind, the Republic corrupt, and the Sith misunderstood. He believed that through discipline and vision, the galaxy could be saved. But his path led not to salvation, but to tyranny and destruction. His philosophy, however, did not die with him. In hidden circles, particularly among ex-Jedi and dark side practitioners, Dooku's teachings were preserved. Holocrons attributed to him circulated among Force-sensitive outcasts. Some saw him as a tragic figure, others as a martyr for reform. A few even attempted to follow his path, seeking to balance Sith power with Jedi ideals. These attempts rarely ended well. Dooku's ideas were powerful, but unstable. Like him, those who followed them often found themselves consumed by the very forces they hoped to control. In the post-Empire era, as the galaxy struggled to rebuild, some historians re-examined Dooku's life with fresh eyes. They saw in him a man who straddled two eras, the last true Jedi philosopher and the first of the modern Sith Lords. He was not a monster, but a man who believed in ideals so strongly that he lost himself in pursuit of them. He was a noble who embraced tyranny in the name of order. A Jedi who became a Sith not out of hatred, but disappointment. His legacy became a study in contrast, complexity, and caution. To understand Count Dooku was to understand the fragile line between light and dark, between idealism and extremism. Though Dooku died during the Clone Wars, his influence rippled far beyond his lifetime. His death was not the end of his story, it was the turning point in a saga that redefined the fate of the galaxy. With his execution at the hands of Anakin Skywalker, the Sith's plan reached a critical juncture. The loss of Dooku removed the final obstacle standing between Sidious and the full conversion of Anakin into Darth Vader. But in another sense, Dooku's demise marked the end of a particular kind of Sith, the philosopher-ruler who sought to blend idealism with authoritarian control. Sidious had no use for visionaries. He wanted enforcers, not thinkers. In that way, Dooku's death signified not only the fall of a man, but the extinction of a more nuanced Sith philosophy. Despite this, Dooku's impact remained. The Clone Wars themselves were his design, his chessboard. Though he acted under Sidious's guidance, the orchestration of the conflict bore his personal touch. He had studied every weakness of the Republic and the Jedi. He had manipulated the ambitions of planetary leaders, exploited the fear of separatism, and helped foster an environment in which war seemed not only inevitable, but necessary. The galaxy that emerged from the Clone Wars was shaped by his actions. Even after his death, many separatist worlds continued to honor him, viewing him not as a Sith Lord but as a martyr to the cause of planetary sovereignty. Monuments to him were erected in secret. Underground movements invoked his name. In some circles, especially on Sereno and former separatist strongholds, Dooku became a symbol of resistance against the Empire. What's remarkable is that even those who opposed him admitted to his charisma and intellect. Dooku had been one of the few Sith who could speak in a Senate chamber or a Jedi council room and command respect. He did not rely on fear alone. He could debate, persuade, and inspire. This made him uniquely dangerous. The Jedi Order, while relieved at his death, could not ignore the uncomfortable truths he had pointed out. Even Yoda, who had trained him from childhood, mourned his loss, not because Dooku had fallen, but because his fall had been avoidable. Yoda understood that the Order had failed Dooku as much as he had failed the Order. They had been blind to his questions, dismissive of his concerns, and rigid in their traditions. By ignoring his early warnings, they allowed a powerful ally to become their greatest threat. In the years following the fall of the Empire, new generations of Jedi began to look back on the Clone Wars with a more critical eye. Luke Skywalker, in particular, was fascinated by the pre-Empire Jedi. He scoured ancient texts, recovered holocrons, and studied the lives of key figures, including Dooku. Luke saw Dooku not merely as a villain, but as a cautionary example. Here was a Jedi who had recognized the flaws of the Order but had chosen the wrong path to correct them. Luke understood that reform must come from compassion, not conquest. But he also acknowledged that Dooku's criticisms were not entirely wrong. The Jedi had become too entangled in politics, too distant from the people they served. Luke used these insights to shape his own Jedi philosophy, one that emphasized balance, introspection, and a more personal connection to the Force. Even within the Sith tradition, Dooku's legacy lived on in subtle ways. Though Sidious sought to erase him, his influence lingered in the methods and ideologies of later dark side practitioners. Some Sith acolytes viewed Dooku's blend of culture and brutality as a model to emulate. He showed that one could wield darkness without descending into madness. He wore the Sith mantle with dignity, not bloodlust. This stood in stark contrast to figures like Darth Maul or Vader, who represented rage and vengeance. Dooku's version of the Sith was more cerebral, more insidious. He corrupted not through terror alone, but through logic, through charm, through the appeal of order in a chaotic galaxy. One of the lesser-known aspects of Dooku's legacy involves his private library. After returning to Serenno, he amassed a collection of rare Jedi manuscripts, Sith scrolls, and ancient Force artifacts. These were hidden in vaults beneath his family's estate, sealed with dark side wards. After the fall of the Empire, some of these relics were discovered by explorers and Force-sensitive scholars. The knowledge within them, while dangerous, offered insight into the pre-Empire Force traditions. They contained his commentaries on the Jedi Code, his analyses of Sith dogma, and his own philosophical writings. One document, known as the Tyrannus Treatise, outlined his belief that the Force was not inherently good or evil but simply power. Neither light nor dark, only the wielder determined its morality. This treatise has been debated by Jedi, Sith, and Grey Force users ever since. Another element of Dooku's legacy involves his apprentices. Though none bore the Sith title officially, his influence on Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress, and even Quinlan Vos cannot be overstated. Ventress, in particular, carried his teachings long after he cast her aside. Though she eventually turned against him and rejected the dark side, the skills and worldview she developed under Dooku shaped her destiny. She became a rare example of someone who had walked in the darkness and returned, and that arc began under his tutelage. In this way, Dooku's influence lived on in both light and dark. His actions indirectly led to the creation of unique Force wielders who did not fit neatly into either Jedi or Sith molds. Ultimately, Count Dooku remains one of the most enigmatic figures in galactic history. He was a man of contradictions, a noble who embraced treachery, a philosopher who chose war, a Jedi who became a Sith not for power alone, but for a belief that the galaxy needed saving. His tragedy lies in the fact that he was not entirely wrong. The Republic was corrupt. The Jedi were flawed. But the solution he chose, control through fear, order through tyranny, betrayed the very ideals he claimed to protect. In trying to save the galaxy, he helped bring it to the brink of annihilation. His story is a lesson in the dangers of extremism, even when born from noble intent. Even in death, Dooku's presence lingers in the Force. Some Force-sensitive individuals have reported visions of him, standing in shadowed halls, cloaked in sorrow, as if seeking redemption he never found in life. Others believe his spirit lingers in places touched by his power. The halls of Serenno, the ruins of his secret laboratories, the battlefields of the Clone Wars. Whether these visions are real or symbolic, they speak to the enduring complexity of his character. He is not remembered as purely villain or victim, but as both, a man who chose his fate and who paid the price for it. In the end, the entire history of Count Dooku is more than just the story of a Jedi turned Sith. It is the story of the Republic's decay, the Jedi Order's blindness, and the tragedy that follows when power is pursued without compassion. His legacy is etched into the bones of the galaxy, a warning that the line between justice and tyranny is as thin as a lightsaber's edge. For all his power, for all his knowledge, Count Dooku could not see that the greatest strength in the Force lies not in domination, but in humility. And in that lesson, perhaps, his story continues to teach, even now, long after his fall. To truly understand his fall, one must understand his beginnings not only as a Jedi but as a child of the aristocracy on Serenno. Born into nobility, Dooku was raised with a deep awareness of status, heritage, and power. His early life was defined by a tension between privilege and rejection. As was tradition for Force-sensitive children, he was taken from his family at a young age and raised in the Jedi Temple. Yet unlike many of his peers, Dooku remembered where he came from. He knew he was a count, heir to one of the wealthiest and most influential houses in the galaxy. The Jedi tried to suppress this identity, to mold him into a being of humility and selflessness. But the seed of pride had already been planted. It would grow in silence. At the Jedi Temple, Dooku excelled. He was brilliant, gifted with the Force, and incredibly disciplined. His mind was sharp, and his skill with a lightsaber became legendary. He was chosen as the Padawan of Master Yoda, the wisest and most revered Jedi of the time. Under Yoda's guidance, Dooku developed a strong command of the Force and an unwavering belief in the importance of order and logic. But there was also a quiet distance between them. Dooku revered Yoda, but he did not share his worldview. He found the Jedi's detachment from politics naive. He questioned the Council's decisions. As he grew older, his disagreements with the Order became more pronounced. He viewed many of the Jedi not as guardians of peace, but as servants of a broken system. After attaining the rank of Jedi Master, Dooku took on his own Padawans, including Rayl and later Qui-Gon Jinn. Both of these apprentices reflected different parts of Dooku's evolving philosophy. With Rayl, he explored the boundaries of the Jedi Code, testing what could be bent without breaking. Rayl's eventual departure from the Order marked one of Dooku's early personal failures. With Qui-Gon, Dooku found a kindred spirit, independent, thoughtful, and morally driven. But Qui-Gon also possessed a compassion that Dooku increasingly lacked. Where Dooku grew cynical, Qui-Gon remained hopeful. This difference created friction, even as Dooku took pride in his Padawan's strength. He saw in Qui-Gon the future of the Jedi, and when Qui-Gon began to diverge from Council orthodoxy, Dooku encouraged it, quietly pleased to see his own doubts echoed. As galactic corruption worsened, Dooku's frustrations intensified. He undertook missions to lawless planets, conflict zones, and systems on the brink of collapse. Each time, he encountered bureaucratic apathy, Senate incompetence, and planetary suffering. The Jedi, tied to the Republic's institutions, were forced to stand by or compromise. Dooku came to view the Jedi as unwilling participants in injustice. They were peacekeepers without power, warriors bound by politics. He lobbied for reform, for stronger Jedi autonomy, for action. The Council refused. Their commitment to neutrality, while noble in theory, had become a form of complicity. Dooku began to distance himself further. He delved into Jedi archives, studying forbidden texts and forgotten lore. He sought understanding beyond what the Council taught. He read about the Sith not with fear, but curiosity. What had truly driven their fall? What if they had once sought justice, just like him? Then came the breaking point, the death of Qui-Gon Jinn. Killed by Darth Maul on Naboo, Qui-Gon's death devastated Dooku. It was not just the loss of an apprentice, but the final confirmation of everything he feared. The Sith had returned, and the Jedi had been blind to it. Dooku blamed the Council, blaming their arrogance and stagnation. They had dismissed Qui-Gon's warnings, refused to believe the dark side could rise again. Dooku saw this as the final betrayal. Soon after, he left the Jedi Order. Publicly, he claimed it was a matter of conscience. Privately, he had already begun corresponding with Darth Sidious. The Sith Lord had been watching Dooku for years, knowing that a man of such conviction and intellect could become a powerful asset. Their early conversations were philosophical, not transactional. Sidious knew how to feed Dooku's ego, to validate his concerns while slowly guiding him toward the dark side. Dooku did not fall in a single moment. It was a gradual erosion, reason giving way to ambition, conviction to control. He believed he could use the dark side without being consumed by it. He studied Sith techniques, experimented with dark rituals, and began using Force abilities the Jedi had forbidden. But he still saw himself as a savior. In his mind, the Republic had to be torn down so that something better could be built. The Clone Wars were not just a means to Sith domination, they were Dooku's attempt to reshape the galaxy. The title of Darth Tyrannus was not one he embraced with glee. It was a mantle he wore with calculated purpose. Dooku was no slave to his passions. Unlike other Sith, he did not revel in destruction. Every move he made was deliberate, aimed at a vision he believed would bring order and justice. But the dark side slowly warped that vision. Over time, he grew more ruthless. He sanctioned assassinations, authorized war crimes, and tolerated cruelty in his generals. He saw this not as evil, but as necessary compromise. In his heart, he still believed himself better than other Sith, refined, composed, purposeful. But he was wrong. The darkness took root, feeding on his pride and isolation. Even his recruitment of Asajj Ventress reflected this duality. He trained her in Sith combat, but refused to name her a true Sith. He used her, manipulated her, and discarded her when it suited his goals. Yet there were moments of real connection, glimpses of the old Jedi who once mentored with compassion. His betrayal of Ventress was not just strategic. It was emblematic of how far he had fallen. He had become what he once despised, a tool of manipulation, a wielder of fear. In these final years, Dooku remained haunted by Qui-Gon's memory. He often meditated on what might have been had Qui-Gon survived. Would he have followed Dooku into rebellion? Could they have reshaped the Order together? Or would Qui-Gon, like Obi-Wan, have remained loyal to the Republic? These questions plagued him, unanswered. They revealed that, despite all his power, Dooku remained deeply human, capable of regret, doubt, and sorrow. Part 6 closes with a reflection on the paradox that defined Dooku's life. He was both noble and tyrant, Jedi and Sith, visionary and traitor. His fall was not the result of weakness, but conviction taken to dangerous extremes. He did not seek domination for its own sake. He sought a better galaxy and chose the wrong path to achieve it. In the process, he helped unleash a war that would consume everything he once held dear. By the time the first battle erupted on Geonosis, Dooku had already maneuvered the galaxy into a state of near collapse. He traveled from system to system, meeting with planetary leaders, business magnates, and military commanders disillusioned with the Republic's inefficiency and corruption. The Confederacy of Independent Systems was not a spontaneous rebellion. It was carefully assembled by Dooku, who promised autonomy, fairness, and protection from the grip of central bureaucracy. These promises were strategic. While the Republic saw the separatists as traitors, many of them saw themselves as freedom fighters. This duality, this political complexity, was intentional. Dooku wanted the war to seem morally ambiguous, to erode the Republic's moral authority, and to exhaust both sides. Central to this deception was Dooku's mastery of diplomacy. Unlike Sidious, who operated from the shadows, Dooku was the public face of the separatists. His charm and intelligence made him the perfect statesman. He appeared calm, thoughtful, even reasonable. To many worlds, he did not look like a tyrant but a liberator. This was no accident. Dooku used propaganda to paint the Jedi as enforcers of corruption, twisting the truth just enough to sow doubt. He gave impassioned speeches denouncing Senate gridlock, the influence of corporate interests, and the failures of galactic law. He pointed to real problems, then offered himself as the solution. In truth, however, every step he took was calculated to plunge the galaxy into war, a war designed to destroy both the Jedi and the Republic from within. Behind closed doors, Dooku worked tirelessly to assemble the separatist war machine. He brokered secret deals with the Techno Union, the Banking Clan, and the Trade Federation. He helped fund massive droid armies, overseen by robotic leaders and tactical masterminds. On Geonosis, in collusion with the Geonosians, he oversaw the production of countless battle droids, weapons platforms, and experimental superweapons. He also encouraged the militarization of separatist planets, urging local governors to build up defense fleets and planetary shields. Dooku was no mere figurehead. He studied military tactics, advised his generals, and sometimes led missions himself. His style of warfare was not based on brute force alone. He preferred surgical strikes, psychological manipulation, and political subversion. To him, the Clone Wars were not just battles of attrition, but contests of ideology. Still, he understood the power of fear. When necessary, he unleashed terror. He authorized the bombing of civilian targets, the use of biological weapons, and the execution of prisoners. His agents infiltrated Republic institutions, carried out assassinations, and sabotaged supply lines. Yet despite these brutal tactics, Dooku maintained the illusion of legitimacy. He presented himself as a reluctant warrior, forced into conflict by the Republic's refusal to reform. This dual image, philosopher and butcher, allowed him to remain a polarizing but respected figure across the galaxy. Even some Jedi admitted privately that he raised valid points, though they abhorred his methods. At the same time, Dooku was managing a far more dangerous relationship, his alliance with Darth Sidious. Though the two Sith Lords shared a goal, they were not equals in trust. Dooku viewed Sidious with a mixture of respect and suspicion. He admired the Chancellor's brilliance but never forgot that the rule of two guaranteed betrayal. Dooku was not naive. He knew that Sidious planned to replace him eventually. In secret, Dooku began seeking his own apprentices, first Ventress, later Savage Apprentice, and even fleeting interest in others. He hoped to use them as pawns in his eventual overthrow of Sidious. In this, Dooku followed the Sith tradition of treachery cloaked in patience. But Sidious anticipated this. He allowed Dooku his illusions of power, all while grooming his true successor, Anakin Skywalker. As the war dragged on, Dooku's faith in his vision began to erode. He saw the toll it took on the galaxy, the millions of deaths, the shattered worlds, the broken families. But instead of stepping back, he pushed forward. He convinced himself that peace would only come through victory. He told himself that the ends justified the means. He grew more reliant on dark side powers, using them not only in combat but in meditation and diplomacy. He became colder, more detached, yet still driven by the belief that he could control the storm he had unleashed. He was wrong. The Clone Wars had taken on a momentum of their own. The line between hero and villain had blurred, and Dooku, once a man of principle, was now seen as a warlord. Among the Jedi, Dooku became the most reviled traitor in generations. His betrayal stung deeply. He had once been one of them, a master, a philosopher, a candidate for the High Council. Now, he was their greatest adversary. Jedi tasked with fighting him often did so with sorrow. Obi-Wan Kenobi, in particular, struggled to reconcile the stories Kagan had told of Dooku with a man now orchestrating galactic chaos. But Dooku had no such conflict. He saw the Jedi as relics, well-meaning but blind, serving a republic that no longer deserved survival. In one sense, his war was a purge, a crucible through which only the worthy would survive. He saw himself as a test for the galaxy. This self-image only deepened as he began to prepare for his final phase. He knew that Sidious planned a transition. First the destruction of the Jedi, then the birth of a new empire. Dooku believed he would be at Sidious's side, ruling the new order together. He envisioned himself not as a Sith brute, but as a refined leader of a galaxy reborn. What he failed to see was that Sidious never intended to share power. The moment Anakin Skywalker was ready, Dooku would be discarded. This blindness, this failure to see the very treachery he claimed to master, would be his undoing. Part 7 ends on the eve of Dooku's greatest failure, the confrontation aboard the Invisible Hand. Captured by Republic forces and brought before Anakin and Obi-Wan, Dooku faced the moment he had unknowingly prepared for all his life. He believed the duel would test Anakin's strength. He believed Sidious would intervene, reveal the truth, and finally raise Dooku to the status of co-ruler. But the truth was far crueler. Sidious ordered Anakin to kill Dooku, not as a gesture of respect, but as a final humiliation. As Anakin's lightsabers crossed at Dooku's throat, the old Count realized too late that he had never been the master of the game, only a piece. Though he was gone, the war he had helped to ignite raged on with greater ferocity than ever before. The Confederacy of Independent Systems, now under the command of General Grievous, operated without the philosophical vision that Dooku had provided. Grievous, a warlord with no patience for politics or ideals, was a brutal tactician who cared little for Dooku's vision of order and justice. The separatist cause began to unravel, no longer unified under a single ideology but held together only by fear and mechanical might. Meanwhile, in the Republic, the death of Dooku was hailed as a decisive turning point. To the public, it seemed as though victory was near. But in truth, Dooku's execution had paved the way for the Republic's final transformation into the Empire. Without Dooku to play the part of the visible Sith threat, Sidious could move more freely, using the chaos of war to consolidate power. With his rival gone, Sidious accelerated his plan to anoint a new apprentice, one more powerful, more malleable, and more dangerous. That apprentice was Anakin Skywalker. But Dooku's influence didn't vanish with him. His teachings, his philosophy, and the damage he inflicted lingered like a scar across the galaxy. His former apprentices, like Asajj Ventress and Savage Opress, continued to act in his shadow. Ventress, in particular, struggled with the void left by her master's death. She had been betrayed by Dooku long before his fall, yet she remained deeply affected by the ideals he had once preached. Her journey, chronicled in The Clone Wars, showed how Dooku's manipulations had long-lasting effects, even on those he discarded. Dooku's greatest weapon was never his lightsaber, it was his ideology. He challenged the fundamental structure of galactic governance and Jedi orthodoxy. Though his actions were ultimately aligned with the Sith, many of the questions he raised about the Republic were legitimate. The Senate was riddled with corruption, the Jedi had become generals in a war they didn't understand, and democracy was fading. Dooku's critique of the Jedi was especially damning. He saw them as detached, emotionless, and subservient to politics. In this, he was not entirely wrong. His defection forced the Jedi Order to reflect on their own decay, though by then it was too late. His personal history added complexity to these critiques. Dooku had grown up within the temple walls, nurtured by the very order he came to despise. His relationship with Yoda was that of a revered but rebellious student. He had once been considered for the council, and his duel with Yoda during the Battle of Geonosis had been symbolic. Student versus master, tradition versus revolution. That duel, like his life, ended in stalemate, not because he lacked power, but because he refused to surrender to either side fully. What made Dooku unique among Sith was his restraint. Unlike Maul or Vader, he did not revel in destruction. He saw violence as a means to an end, not a source of identity. This was both his strength and his flaw. In the Sith hierarchy, power was taken, not earned through wisdom or logic. Dooku believed he could mold the Sith into something more refined, more calculated. But Sidious never intended for the Sith to evolve, only to dominate. Dooku's failure to grasp this left him vulnerable to betrayal. In many ways, Dooku represented the final link between the old Jedi Order and the Sith resurgence. He was a transitional figure, one foot in the past, the other in the storm to come. His death marked the end of that bridge. After him, the galaxy moved into a darker, more absolute era. The nuanced critique he offered was lost beneath the roar of Palpatine's empire. History, as written by the victors, reduced him to a mere villain, a fallen Jedi who led a failed rebellion. But hidden beneath the official records and imperial propaganda, Dooku's legacy endured. Holocrons containing his speeches and teachings survived in secret archives. Rogue Force users and disillusioned Jedi sometimes studied them, intrigued by his logic, if not his methods. He was remembered not just as a traitor, but as a philosopher of the Force. A dark philosopher, certainly, but one who challenged the complacency of his time. He became a symbol of what happens when ideology outpaces empathy. Dooku's homeworld of Serenno also felt the ripple of his life. Once a proud and noble house, his family name became associated with treason. Still, some on Serenno defended him, believing he had acted out of conviction rather than cruelty. After the Empire's rise, Serenno was absorbed into imperial control, its nobility stripped of autonomy. In trying to free his people from Republic bureaucracy, Dooku had delivered them into something far worse. Years later, after the fall of the Empire and the rise of the New Republic, Dooku's name was revisited by historians, archivists, and Jedi researchers trying to understand how the galaxy had fallen so far. His story was re-examined not as a simple arc of villainy, but as a tragic trajectory, a Jedi who saw too much, felt too deeply, and chose the wrong path. His legacy became a warning to new Jedi, that even the most intelligent and noble can be consumed by the darkness, especially when they believe they are immune to it. Dooku's teachings on power, autonomy, and justice also influenced future generations of Force users who operated outside the traditional Jedi-Sith binary. Grey Jedi, and later Force-sensitive groups like the Acolytes of the Beyond, cited Dooku's writings as proof that the Force could be wielded without allegiance to outdated orders. Whether those groups upheld or distorted his philosophy is unclear, but the fact that they drew from his life at all proves that his impact endured. Part 9 concludes with a meditation on Dooku's legacy. He was not the most powerful Sith, nor the most feared, but he was among the most consequential. His defection shattered the illusion of Jedi infallibility. His leadership made the separatist movement viable. His death accelerated the rise of the Empire. And through it all, he remained a man of paradox, a warrior who hated war, a reformer who embraced tyranny, a Jedi who became a Sith not for passion, but for purpose. As the final chapter in the saga of the fallen Jedi, his story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of pride, disillusionment, and the seductive allure of power. Dooku was a man who sought to save the Republic, but ultimately helped destroy it. His choices shaped the galaxy's darkest era, the rise of the Galactic Empire, and the near extinction of the Jedi Order. But beyond the politics and war, his story is deeply human, a portrait of ambition, loss, and the tragic cost of ideological blindness. Dooku's journey began as a promising Jedi Knight, gifted with intelligence, charisma, and a strong sense of justice. Raised on Sereno, he was steeped in nobility and tradition, yet restless and questioning. His early years in the Jedi Order showed a man who respected discipline but chafed against bureaucracy. He longed for reform, for a galaxy where fairness and freedom prevailed over stagnation and corruption. But his vision diverged from the Jedi Council's cautious approach. His idealism slowly gave way to cynicism as he witnessed Senate corruption, the manipulation of power by wealthy corporations, and the Jedi's role in political games. This growing disillusionment drove him to seek alternatives outside the Order. His meeting with Darth Sidious marked a turning point, a deal forged not merely for power, but for what Dooku believed was necessary change. He convinced himself that embracing the dark side was a means to an end, that the galaxy required a firm hand to restore balance. This mindset reveals the tragic flaw at his core, a belief that the ends justify the means, no matter the cost. By walking this path, Dooku severed ties with his former ideals and became an instrument of destruction disguised as a savior. Throughout the Clone Wars, Dooku played a dual role, separatist leader and Sith apprentice. He crafted a rebellion that exposed the Republic's weaknesses but was ultimately a puppet in Sidious's grand design. His political skill and force mastery made him a formidable adversary, yet he remained trapped by the very systems he sought to dismantle. His rivalry with Anakin Skywalker symbolized the shifting balance of power within the Sith hierarchy and the tragic cycle of betrayal inherent in the rule of two. In his final moments, Dooku faced the bitter reality that he was disposable, a stepping stone to a new era of darkness. Dooku's death aboard the Invisible Hand did not end his influence. His philosophical legacy continued to provoke debate among Jedi scholars, Sith acolytes, and Force mystics. He questioned the Jedi's dogma and Republic governance in ways that echoed long after the Empire's rise. Some saw him as a visionary corrupted by pride, others as a warning of how good intentions can be twisted into evil deeds. His mastery of Makashi and elegant combat style remain admired among lightsaber practitioners, symbolizing his refined yet ruthless nature. In the broader Star Wars mythology, Dooku stands apart as a complex antagonist. Unlike other villains driven solely by hatred or ambition, his motivations were nuanced, combining political idealism with cold pragmatism. His fall illustrates the dangers of extremism and the seductive power of the dark side when mixed with genuine concern for justice. He embodies the tragedy of a hero who lost his way, sacrificing morality for control. His influence also highlights the fragility of institutions. The Jedi Order's failure to recognize and address internal flaws allowed Dooku's defection and rise. The Republic's corruption provided fertile ground for separatism. His story underscores the need for vigilance, humility, and openness to change within any system of governance or belief. Without these, even the noblest causes can become corrupted from within. Looking beyond the films and television series, Expanded Universe works deepen our understanding of Dooku. They reveal his personal relationships, moments of doubt, and the internal conflicts that shaped his choices. His mentorship of Ventress and Apprentice adds layers of complexity to his character, showing both a teacher's guidance and a manipulator's cruelty. These relationships humanize him, reminding us that even villains have loyalties and vulnerabilities. Ultimately, Count Dooku's life is a story about balance, between light and dark, idealism and pragmatism, freedom and control. His fall reminds us that power without compassion leads to ruin. His vision for the galaxy, though flawed, invites reflection on the nature of leadership and the cost of revolution. His journey is a dark mirror reflecting the dangers that lie within all who seek to remake the world. The story of Count Dooku closes not with simple judgment, but with understanding. He was a man shaped by his time, his choices, and his ambitions, a figure whose history warns and teaches. Through him, we see the complexities of good and evil, the fragile line between hero and villain, and the eternal struggle for balance in a galaxy far, far away. Count Dooku's origins and Jedi training. Count Dooku, also known by his Sith name Darth Tyrannus, was born on the planet Sereno into a noble family known for their wealth, influence, and long-standing traditions. From an early age, Dooku was groomed to carry on the legacy of his house, marked by a strong sense of duty and responsibility toward his people. Sereno itself was a planet of aristocratic values, where lineage and honor shaped one's identity and place in society. Dooku's noble upbringing instilled in him a sense of pride and a desire for order that would shape his worldview throughout his life. Recognizing his strong connection to the Force, the Jedi Order recruited Dooku as a young boy. He was taken to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, where his formal training began. As a Jedi initiate, Dooku demonstrated exceptional talent and intelligence, quickly rising through the ranks. His natural aptitude for the Force, combined with his keen mind and disciplined nature, earned him the respect of his peers and masters alike. Unlike many Jedi who embraced the Order's communal and egalitarian ideals, Dooku's aristocratic background influenced his more formal and somewhat aloof demeanor. He believed deeply in tradition, structure, and hierarchy, which sometimes put him at odds with the more progressive or humble members of the Jedi Council. Throughout his training, Dooku excelled in lightsaber combat, particularly in the Makashi style, which emphasized precision, elegance, and efficiency. This form of combat suited his personality, reflecting his preference for calculated moves over brute force. His proficiency in Makashi would later distinguish him as one of the most skilled duelists in Jedi history. Dooku's relationship with the Jedi Council was complex. Although he was eventually appointed to the Council itself, he often clashed with other members over their approach to politics and the Republic's governance. He believed that the Jedi should act more decisively to confront corruption and injustice, whereas the Council preferred diplomacy and caution. This ideological divide deepened his growing disillusionment with the Order. During his time as a Jedi, Dooku encountered notable figures such as Yoda, his mentor, and Qui-Gon Jinn, his apprentice. Qui-Gon's independent thinking and willingness to challenge the Council's orthodoxy resonated with Dooku, creating a bond rooted in shared skepticism of the Jedi Order's rigidity. However, their philosophies diverged when it came to how best to address the Republic's problems. As the years passed, Dooku's noble responsibilities began to weigh on him. He felt torn between his duties to Sereno and his role in the Jedi Order. This internal conflict added to his sense of alienation and fostered a belief that the Jedi had lost their way. The Order's failure to address the Republic's corruption, coupled with their increasing militarization, convinced Dooku that more drastic measures were needed to restore balance to the galaxy. These convictions set the stage for his eventual defection. Dooku's decision to leave the Jedi Order was unprecedented and controversial. His departure was not motivated by a desire for power alone, but by a profound disillusionment with the galaxy's institutions. He believed that the Republic was beyond saving through traditional means, and that the Jedi had become complicit in maintaining an unjust system. Upon leaving, Dooku returned to Sereno, where he resumed his role as Count. However, his political ambitions extended beyond his homeworld. His alliance with Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord secretly controlling the Republic's highest echelons, marked his transformation into Darth Tyrannus and his entry into the dark side of the Force. This alliance was both strategic and ideological. Sidious offered Dooku the means to enact the changes he sought, albeit through manipulation, deception, and war. In exchange, Dooku became a Sith apprentice, embracing a philosophy that balanced his desire for order with the ruthless pragmatism of the dark side. Dooku's origins and training provide crucial context for understanding his motivations and actions throughout the Clone Wars. His aristocratic background shaped his worldview, emphasizing tradition and authority. His Jedi training instilled discipline and mastery of the Force, but also exposed him to the Order's limitations. These factors combined to create a complex figure who sought to reshape the galaxy by any means necessary, even if it meant betraying his former ideals and comrades. Count Dooku's philosophy and beliefs. Count Dooku's philosophy was shaped by a unique blend of aristocratic tradition, Jedi teachings, and his own evolving interpretation of justice and order in the galaxy. Unlike many Sith who were driven primarily by raw ambition, hatred, or thirst for power, Dooku's motivations were more nuanced and rooted in a genuine belief that the existing political and spiritual systems were failing. At the core of Dooku's worldview was a profound disillusionment with the Galactic Republic and the Jedi Order. He perceived the Republic as deeply corrupt and inefficient, dominated by bureaucrats and special interests who cared little for the common people. To Dooku, the Senate was a playground for selfish agendas, where legislation was stalled or manipulated for profit and power. He believed this systemic rot threatened the galaxy's stability and future. Dooku also viewed the Jedi Order as having strayed from its original purpose. He criticized the Jedi for becoming militarized agents of the Republic rather than peacekeepers and spiritual guardians. Their involvement as generals in the Clone Wars was, in his eyes, a perversion of their role. He saw them as complacent, blinded by dogma, and overly obedient to a flawed government. This criticism was partly why Dooku had been sympathetic to the views of his former apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn, who also challenged the Council's rigidity. Dooku's solution was radical. He believed the galaxy needed a new order founded on strong leadership and clear authority, even if it required the use of force and control. He argued that only through decisive action and restructuring could peace and justice be restored. This belief aligned with Sith ideology to an extent, but Dooku's embrace of the dark side was not solely for personal gain, it was a means to an end. His adoption of the Sith mantle as Darth Tyrannus was as much political as it was spiritual. He saw the Sith as a tool to implement the sweeping changes he desired. The Rule of Two, which dictated the Sith's relationship, appealed to his sense of hierarchy and efficiency. Dooku respected Darth Sidious not just as a master in the Force but as a political strategist who understood how to manipulate galactic institutions. However, Dooku's confidence in his ability to control the Sith's power ultimately blinded him to Sidious's true intentions. His belief that he could wield the dark side for noble purposes echoes a common theme in Star Wars: the danger of justifying evil acts by appealing to higher ideals. Dooku's ideology was also influenced by his aristocratic values. He favored order, tradition, and a structured society where leadership was clear and respected. He rejected the democratic ideals of the Republic, viewing them as chaotic and vulnerable to corruption. His desire to restore the power of noble houses and strong rulers reflected his background and shaped his vision for the galaxy. In addition to his political and philosophical beliefs, Dooku's approach to the Force was distinctive. He was a master of restraint, favoring precision over brute strength. His use of Makashi, a lightsaber form focused on elegance and control, symbolized his preference for balance and discipline. Unlike other Sith who often succumbed to rage and aggression, Dooku maintained composure and strategic thinking in battle. This approach extended to his Force abilities. He was skilled in Force lightning, telekinesis, and mind manipulation, but he wielded these powers with calculated purpose rather than indiscriminate fury. His mastery made him one of the most formidable Sith lords of his time. Dooku's philosophy also encompassed a cynical view of morality. He rejected the binary concepts of good and evil championed by the Jedi, embracing instead a pragmatic outlook where outcomes justified methods. This moral relativism justified his participation in war, assassination, and political subterfuge. He saw these acts as necessary evils in pursuit of a greater good. Despite his cold pragmatism, Dooku was not devoid of honor. He adhered to a personal code that valued loyalty, respect, and dignity, especially toward those he considered worthy. His mentorship of apprentices like Asajj Ventress, though ultimately fraught with betrayal, showed a complex interplay between cruelty and care. This honor code set him apart from more chaotic or sadistic Sith. In summary, Count Dooku's philosophy combined aristocratic ideals, Jedi teachings, and Sith pragmatism into a distinctive worldview. He was a disillusioned idealist who sought to remake the galaxy through order and control, believing that the ends justified the means. His embrace of the dark side was a strategic choice, intended to wield power for reform rather than destruction. However, his failure to see the corrupting nature of the Sith and the true intentions of Darth Sidious ultimately led to his downfall. This complex philosophy makes Dooku one of the most intellectually intriguing figures in Star Wars lore, illustrating how noble intentions can become twisted by ambition and betrayal. Count Dooku's fighting style and force abilities. Count Dooku was renowned throughout the galaxy as one of the most skilled and elegant duelists of his time. His combat prowess was not only a testament to his training as a Jedi, but also to his mastery of Sith techniques after turning to the dark side. His fighting style and use of the Force reflected his personality, calm, precise, and commanding, setting him apart from many of his contemporaries. Central to Dooku's combat identity was his mastery of the Makashi lightsaber form, also known as Form 2. This style was developed during the early days of the Jedi Order specifically for lightsaber-to-lightsaber dueling. It emphasized precision, fluid footwork, and efficient, controlled strikes, favoring finesse over brute force. Makashi practitioners were experts in parrying and counterattacking, often exploiting their opponent's mistakes with surgical precision. For Dooku, Makashi was more than a combat technique, it was an extension of his aristocratic and refined demeanor. Unlike other Jedi or Sith who often relied on overwhelming strength or aggressive tactics, Dooku's Makashi was elegant and calculated. His duels often resembled a deadly dance, with each move carefully measured to conserve energy and outmaneuver his opponent. His style was also highly adaptable, allowing him to face a variety of foes, from lightsaber-wielding Jedi to unarmed combatants. Dooku's precision and efficiency made him particularly effective against opponents who favored aggressive or chaotic fighting styles. His duels with Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi showcased this contrast. While Anakin's style was raw and powerful, driven by passion and aggression, Dooku remained composed, using his skill to exploit openings. This strategic approach allowed him to hold his own against multiple Jedi Masters. In addition to his lightsaber skills, Dooku was a formidable user of the Force. His control over Force abilities was impressive, combining offensive power with defensive techniques. One of his signature powers was Force Lightning, which he wielded with devastating effect. Unlike many Sith who unleashed Force Lightning in uncontrolled bursts, Dooku's use was precise and deliberate, often employed to incapacitate opponents or disrupt their concentration. His telekinetic abilities were equally advanced. He could use the Force to throw multiple opponents, manipulate objects with great force, and even choke or crush enemies at a distance. This telekinetic skill complemented his lightsaber combat, allowing him to control the battlefield and dictate the pace of engagements. Another notable aspect of Dooku's Force use was his skill in mind manipulation. He was adept at influencing weaker-willed individuals, planting suggestions, or clouding their judgment. This ability extended beyond battle, aiding him in political intrigue and subterfuge. His talents made him a master manipulator both on and off the battlefield. Dooku's approach to combat was characterized by patience and control. He rarely succumbed to rage or impulsive attacks, distinguishing him from many Sith lords whose fighting was fueled by anger and hatred. Instead, he maintained a calm and measured demeanor, using the Force and his lightsaber with disciplined restraint. This trait made him a deadly and unpredictable adversary. Beyond the technical aspects of his fighting, Dooku's charisma and presence on the battlefield were significant. He commanded respect and fear through his mere presence, often unsettling opponents before the duel even began. His noble bearing and confident posture reflected his belief in his own superiority and destiny. This psychological advantage was an important element of his combat effectiveness. Dooku's mastery extended to strategy and tactics, not just personal combat. He was known to analyze his opponent's strengths and weaknesses meticulously, crafting plans that leveraged his skills and minimized risks. This strategic mind made him a valuable military leader during the Clone Wars and a dangerous Sith apprentice. In training others, Dooku's combat philosophy emphasized discipline and refinement. His mentorship of apprentices like Asajj Ventress involved teaching not only fighting techniques but also the importance of control and patience. However, his harsh and demanding style sometimes bred resentment and rebellion among his followers. In summary, Count Dooku's fighting style and force abilities reflected a unique blend of aristocratic elegance, Jedi discipline, and Sith ruthlessness. His mastery of Makashi and force powers made him one of the most formidable duelists in galactic history. His calm, precise approach to combat and strategic mind distinguished him from other Sith Lords and Jedi alike, contributing to his reputation as a deadly and sophisticated warrior. Count Dooku's relationships and legacy. Count Dooku's life was marked by a series of complex and influential relationships that shaped his path and left a lasting impact on the galaxy. From his early connections within the Jedi Order to his alliances and betrayals as a Sith Lord, these relationships reveal the multifaceted nature of his character and the far-reaching consequences of his actions. One of the earliest and most significant relationships in Dooku's life was with his Jedi mentor, Yoda. Yoda recognized Dooku's potential and took him under his wing during his formative years in the Jedi Order. Their relationship was marked by mutual respect, though also by differences in philosophy. Yoda's emphasis on humility and the Jedi Code often clashed with Dooku's aristocratic pride and desire for decisive action. Despite these differences, Yoda remained a guiding figure during Dooku's early development as a Jedi. Dooku's mentorship of Qui-Gon Jinn was another pivotal connection. As Qui-Gon's master, Dooku influenced the young Jedi's independent thinking and skepticism toward the Jedi Council's rigidity. Qui-Gon's belief in following the living force rather than strict doctrine resonated with Dooku's own doubts about the Order. However, their paths diverged, particularly when it came to confronting the Republic's corruption and the use of power. Qui-Gon remained committed to the Jedi ideals, while Dooku eventually rejected them. The relationship between Dooku and his apprentice Asajj Ventress further illustrates his complex nature. Ventress was a former Jedi who fell to the dark side and became Dooku's assassin and student. Their relationship was marked by a combination of mentorship, manipulation, and betrayal. Dooku valued Ventress for her skills and loyalty, yet he ultimately discarded her when she became inconvenient or uncontrollable. This dynamic highlights Dooku's pragmatic and sometimes ruthless approach to alliances. Dooku's alliance with Darth Sidious was perhaps the most consequential relationship of his life. As Sidious's Sith apprentice Darth Tyrannus, Dooku played a crucial role in the Sith's plan to overthrow the Republic and destroy the Jedi Order. While he respected Sidious's power and cunning, Dooku also harbored ambitions of his own, believing he could eventually supplant his master or at least wield Sith power for his vision of galactic order. This relationship was fraught with deception and mistrust, culminating in Dooku's death at the hands of Anakin Skywalker under Sidious's command. Politically, Dooku's leadership of the separatists involved complex interactions with numerous factions and leaders. He managed to unite diverse groups such as corporate entities, star systems, and mercenary organizations under a common cause. However, underlying tensions and conflicting interests often threatened the cohesion of the Confederacy. Dooku's diplomatic skills and authoritative presence were vital in maintaining this fragile alliance. Dooku's legacy extends beyond his death and the Clone Wars. His role in orchestrating the conflict, creating the clone army, and paving the way for the Galactic Empire had profound and lasting effects on the galaxy's history. Though ultimately a tragic figure, his actions set in motion the fall of the Republic and the rise of imperial tyranny. In the Jedi Order's history, Dooku's betrayal served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of rigidity, arrogance, and loss of faith. His story underscores the complex nature of good and evil, showing how ideals can be twisted by disappointment and ambition. In popular culture and Star Wars lore, Count Dooku is remembered as a sophisticated and charismatic villain. His combination of noble bearing, philosophical depth, and formidable combat skills made him a compelling antagonist. His character challenges simple notions of villainy, inviting reflection on the motives and consequences behind betrayal and power struggles. In summary, Count Dooku's relationships shaped his evolution from Jedi Master to Sith Lord and influenced the course of galactic history. His mentorships, alliances, and betrayals reveal a man driven by conviction, ambition, and a desire for order. His legacy is one of complexity and tragedy, leaving an indelible mark on the Star Wars universe. Count Dooku's impact on Jedi and Sith philosophies. Count Dooku's journey from Jedi Master to Sith Lord represents a significant chapter in the evolution of both Jedi and Sith thought, challenging and reshaping long-standing beliefs within both orders. His actions and beliefs left an enduring legacy that influenced the philosophies and practices of these ancient traditions. Within the Jedi Order, Dooku's departure and subsequent betrayal underscored critical weaknesses and sparked introspection. His criticisms of the Order's rigidity, dogmatism, and political entanglements highlighted issues that many Jedi either ignored or suppressed. Dooku argued that the Jedi had strayed from their original mission of maintaining peace and balance in the Force, becoming instead enforcers of a corrupt republic. This critique resonated with some Jedi, including his former apprentice Qui-Gon Jinn, who advocated for a more flexible and intuitive approach to the Force. Dooku's defection forced the Jedi to confront the limits of their code and methods. His example revealed how pride, disillusionment, and political naivete could lead even the most skilled Jedi astray. The Order's failure to address corruption and adapt to changing realities contributed to internal dissent and vulnerability. This introspection influenced Jedi reforms in later years, as they sought to balance tradition with pragmatism. On the Sith side, Dooku's role as Darth Tyrannus contributed to the evolving interpretation of Sith philosophy and strategy. As a Sith Lord, he embodied a more measured and intellectual approach compared to the often impulsive and wrathful nature of his predecessors. Dooku's preference for calculated restraint, strategic thinking, and political maneuvering introduced a new dimension to Sith practice, emphasizing subtlety alongside power. His adherence to the rule of two, the Sith doctrine that only two Sith exist at a time, a master and an apprentice, demonstrated a commitment to Sith tradition while also showcasing the dangers of ambition and betrayal within the Order. Dooku's eventual betrayal by Darth Sidious highlighted the ruthless nature of Sith relationships and the endless cycle of deception and power struggles. Philosophically, Dooku's blend of Jedi ideals with Sith pragmatism challenged strict dichotomies between light and dark. He believed in the necessity of order and justice but rejected the Jedi's methods, embracing the dark side to achieve what he saw as a greater good. This moral ambiguity contributed to a richer and more complex understanding of the Force in the Star Wars narrative. His story illustrated how the dark side could be wielded not just through anger and hatred, but also through ideology and political will. Furthermore, Dooku's impact extended to how Force users approached leadership and authority. His aristocratic values influenced his belief in hierarchical structures and strong governance, contrasting with the Jedi's democratic and egalitarian tendencies. This divergence highlighted competing visions for the galaxy's future and the role of Force users within it. Dooku's legacy prompted both Jedi and Sith to reconsider their assumptions about power, morality, and the Force. His life and choices served as cautionary examples of how ideals can be corrupted and how power can both create and destroy. In summary, Count Dooku's impact on Jedi and Sith philosophies was profound. He challenged the Jedi Order's complacency and rigidity while introducing a more strategic and political dimension to Sith practice. His complex blending of ideals and pragmatism enriched the Star Wars mythos, illustrating the nuanced interplay between light and dark, order and chaos, tradition and innovation. Count Dooku's ultimate downfall and legacy in popular culture. Count Dooku's story culminates in his ultimate downfall, a moment that not only ended his life but also signaled a turning point in galactic history. His death aboard the separatist flagship, the Invisible Hand, was a dramatic conclusion to his complex journey as Jedi Master, Sith Lord, and political leader. This event had far-reaching consequences, both within the Star Wars universe and beyond, influencing the narrative and character archetypes in popular culture. Dooku's downfall was orchestrated as part of Darth Sidious's grand plan to consolidate power. Although Dooku had served as the Sith apprentice Darth Tyrannus and was instrumental in the Clone Wars, Sidious viewed him as expendable once he had outlived his usefulness. The plan involved luring Dooku into a confrontation with Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi aboard the Invisible Hand. During this battle, Dooku initially demonstrated his formidable combat prowess, nearly defeating Obi-Wan and incapacitating him. However, the arrival of Anakin changed the balance. With Sidious's secret guidance, Anakin overpowered Dooku, severing his hands and ultimately killing him with his own lightsaber. This moment was symbolic. It marked the fall of a Sith Lord and the rise of another, setting Anakin on the path to becoming Darth Vader. Dooku's death removed a key player from the Clone Wars, leaving the separatists leaderless and vulnerable. His absence accelerated the conflict's end and paved the way for Sidious to declare himself Emperor, transforming the Republic into the Galactic Empire. Thus, Dooku's downfall was not just a personal defeat but a pivotal event that reshaped the galaxy's political landscape. In terms of legacy, Count Dooku remains one of the most compelling villains in the Star Wars saga. His character combines nobility, tragedy, and menace, making him a richly layered antagonist. Unlike many villains driven solely by evil or madness, Dooku's motivations stem from disillusionment, ideology, and a desire for order, adding depth to his portrayal. In popular culture, Dooku has become an iconic figure representing the archetype of the fallen noble, someone who rejects their original path and embraces darkness for what they perceive as a greater cause. His elegant fighting style, distinctive appearance, and commanding voice have made him a favorite among fans and a memorable part of the franchise's lore. Beyond Star Wars, Dooku's character influences storytelling by illustrating the complexity of villainy. He embodies the idea that antagonists are often shaped by circumstance, belief, and conflicting loyalties rather than simple malice. This nuance encourages audiences to consider themes of morality, power, and redemption. Furthermore, Dooku's narrative highlights the dangers of political ambition and manipulation. His rise and fall serve as a cautionary tale about the costs of betrayal and the cyclical nature of power struggles. These themes resonate across genres, making his story relevant beyond the specific context of Star Wars. In summary, Count Dooku's ultimate downfall was a dramatic and consequential event that shaped the Star Wars saga's trajectory. His legacy endures through his complex characterization and thematic significance. As a symbol of fallen nobility, ideological conflict, and the interplay between light and dark, Dooku continues to captivate audiences and inspire storytelling in popular culture. Count Dooku's summary and reflection. Count Dooku's life and legacy represent a rich tapestry woven with complexity, ambition, and tragedy. From his early days as a respected Jedi Master and mentor to his transformation into the Sith Lord Darth Tyrannus and leader of the separatists, Dooku's story is marked by profound ideological shifts and pivotal galactic events. As a Jedi, Dooku was distinguished by his aristocratic demeanor, refined combat skills, and philosophical outlook. He was a figure of authority and respect, serving as a mentor to notable Jedi such as Qui-Gon Jinn. However, his growing disillusionment with the Jedi Order's perceived corruption and rigidity led him to abandon his allegiance, seeking a new path to restore order and justice to the galaxy. His turn to the dark side was not a descent into mindless evil, but a calculated choice driven by a desire to impose his vision of order and control. As Darth Tyrannus, Dooku became a key player in Darth Sidious's grand plan, orchestrating the Clone Wars and manipulating galactic factions to weaken the Republic and the Jedi. His mastery of the Makashi lightsaber form, combined with his powerful and precise force abilities, made him a formidable opponent. Yet, his strategic mind and political acumen were equally critical to his influence. Dooku's relationships reveal much about his character: his mentorship of Qui-Gon Jinn, complex alliance with Asajj Ventress, and ultimately, his subservience and betrayal by Darth Sidious. These connections highlight themes of loyalty, ambition, and the costs of power. His leadership of the separatists demonstrated his ability to unify disparate groups and challenge the status quo, though ultimately, he was a pawn in Sidious's scheme. Philosophically, Dooku challenged both Jedi and Sith traditions, exposing flaws and introducing nuanced approaches to the Force. His life illustrated the blurred lines between light and dark, idealism and pragmatism, loyalty and betrayal. Dooku's downfall was a defining moment, symbolizing the cyclical nature of Sith ambition and the tragic consequences of his choices. His death at the hands of Anakin Skywalker set the stage for the rise of the Galactic Empire and the fall of the Jedi Order. In popular culture, Count Dooku endures as a complex villain whose motivations transcend simple evil. His elegance, intellect, and moral ambiguity have made him a memorable figure who challenges audiences to consider the nature of power and conviction. Reflecting on Dooku's story encourages a deeper understanding of how ideals can be corrupted and how personal and political ambitions shape history. His legacy is a testament to the enduring themes of Star Wars: the struggle between light and dark, the consequences of choice, and the complexities of identity and belief. Darth Sidious and the Sith Master Apprentice dynamic. Darth Sidious, also known as Emperor Palpatine, was the dark power behind much of Count Dooku's story. As Dooku's Sith Master, Sidious exemplified manipulation, patience, and ultimate ambition. Their relationship was a classic example of the Sith rule of two, where the apprentice serves the master until powerful enough to replace them, only to be betrayed in turn. Sidious carefully groomed Dooku, exploiting his disillusionment with the Jedi and the Republic to turn him into Darth Tyrannus. Dooku's role was to further Sidious's goal of galactic domination by destabilizing the Republic and eliminating the Jedi through the Clone Wars. Despite Dooku's intelligence and power, he underestimated Sidious's ruthlessness. This miscalculation led to his downfall, as Sidious orchestrated events to pit Dooku against Anakin Skywalker, ensuring his apprentice's death and the rise of a more controllable Sith Lord. Anakin Skywalker and the tragic apprentice archetype. Anakin Skywalker's connection to Count Dooku is pivotal. Their confrontations embody the conflict between youthful passion and seasoned experience, light and dark, and the shifting tides of loyalty. Dooku represented what Anakin might become if consumed by disillusionment and ambition, an elegant, powerful figure who sacrificed morality for order. Their duels were intense not only physically but symbolically, foreshadowing Anakin's eventual fall to the dark side. Dooku's defeat at Anakin's hands was a catalyst for Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader, signaling a shift in Sith power and the end of the Clone Wars. Asajj Ventress and the complex nature of loyalty and betrayal. Asajj Ventress was one of Dooku's most notable apprentices, trained in the dark side but ultimately discarded by him. Their relationship highlights the precariousness of alliances within the Sith and the personal cost of ambition. Ventress's loyalty to Dooku was genuine, yet Dooku's pragmatic and often cold treatment of her revealed the ruthless nature of Sith mentorship. After Dooku abandoned her, Ventress's journey became one of vengeance, redemption, and identity, illustrating the complicated aftermath of Dooku's actions and their ripple effects across the galaxy. The Clone Wars and the galactic conflict. Count Dooku's leadership of the separatists placed him at the center of the Clone Wars, a galaxy-spanning conflict that shaped the destiny of countless beings. His role as both a military commander and political leader demonstrated his multifaceted influence. The war itself was a tragic manipulation orchestrated by Sidious, with Dooku as a key instrument. The conflict eroded the Republic, destroyed the Jedi Order's reputation, and set the stage for the rise of the Empire. Understanding the Clone Wars is essential to grasping Dooku's impact and the wider Star Wars narrative. The Jedi Order's decline and internal struggles. Dooku's story is intertwined with the Jedi Order's failure to adapt to galactic changes. His departure highlighted cracks within the Order, its dogmatic rigidity, political entanglements, and inability to perceive the true threat of the Sith. The Jedi's struggle to maintain peace and order in a corrupt republic ultimately left them vulnerable to manipulation and destruction. Dooku's betrayal forced the Jedi to reflect on their shortcomings, shaping their fate and the broader saga. In conclusion, Count Dooku's story is deeply connected to many key figures and events in Star Wars. His interactions with Darth Sidious, Anakin Skywalker, Asajj Ventress, and the Jedi Order enrich his character and the galaxy's history. Exploring these relationships and contexts provides a fuller picture of the complex web of power, ideology, and destiny that defines the Star Wars universe. Asajj Ventress is one of the most compelling and complex characters in the Star Wars universe, whose story is deeply intertwined with Count Dooku's ambitions, betrayals, and the broader conflict of the Clone Wars. Her journey from Jedi initiate to dark side assassin and beyond offers a rich exploration of loyalty, power, identity, and redemption. By examining Ventress's background, her relationship with Dooku, and her evolving role in the galaxy, we can gain a deeper understanding of the nuances in Sith philosophy and the human costs of the galactic struggle. Ventress began her life as a promising Jedi initiate, trained from a young age in the ways of the Force. However, her path took a tragic turn during the separatist conflicts when she was orphaned, losing her family and homeworld to the chaos of war. This personal trauma made her vulnerable to the seductive allure of the dark side, where pain and loss could be transformed into power and vengeance. Count Dooku recognized Ventress's potential and took her under his wing, molding her into a deadly assassin and apprentice capable of executing his strategic plans. Their relationship was complex and fraught with tension. On one hand, Dooku acted as mentor, teacher, and patron, providing Ventress with the training and resources to become a formidable warrior. Her skills in lightsaber combat were exceptional, and she was trained in the dark side Force techniques that made her a terrifying opponent on the battlefield. On the other hand, their connection was also marked by manipulation and mistrust. Dooku's pragmatic ruthlessness meant that he saw Ventress primarily as a tool to be used and discarded if necessary. Despite her fierce loyalty and devotion, Dooku was willing to betray her when it suited his larger ambitions. Ventress's training under Dooku honed her into an effective agent of the separatists, capable of carrying out covert operations designed to destabilize the Republic and weaken the Jedi Order. She was often deployed to assassinate key figures or disrupt crucial plans, operating in the shadows where her lethal skills could be utilized most effectively. Her presence on the battlefield struck fear into the hearts of her enemies and earned her a reputation as one of the deadliest operatives in the galaxy. However, the nature of Sith apprenticeship is inherently precarious. The rule of two dictates that there are only ever two Sith at one time, a master and an apprentice. This doctrine fosters an environment of mistrust and ambition, as each apprentice must eventually surpass or replace their master. Ventress's eventual abandonment by Dooku exposed the brutal reality of this system. When she ceased to be useful or became a liability, Dooku cast her aside without hesitation, leaving her to fend for herself. This betrayal deeply wounded Ventress, fueling her desire for vengeance and shaping the next phase of her journey. Her story after Dooku's betrayal is one of struggle and transformation. Feeling betrayed by the Sith and rejected by the order she once belonged to, Ventress navigated a difficult path between darkness and redemption. At times, she allied with former enemies, including Jedi and bounty hunters, in pursuit of her own goals or survival. This period revealed the complexity of her character, as she grappled with questions of identity, loyalty, and purpose. Ventress challenged the simplistic labels of hero or villain, embodying instead the nuanced spectrum of moral ambiguity that Star Wars often explores. Ventress's narrative also casts important light on Count Dooku's character and leadership style. His treatment of her reveals his willingness to use others as means to an end, embodying the ruthless and transactional nature of Sith relationships. Loyalty in this context is conditional, and betrayal is not just expected but an integral part of the power structure. Dooku's reliance on subordinates like Ventress was both a strength and a vulnerability. While he benefited from her skills and loyalty, his underestimation of her potential to defy him ultimately contributed to his downfall. Their relationship exemplifies the dangerous game of ambition and manipulation at the heart of Sith philosophy. Beyond their personal dynamic, Ventress's journey highlights broader themes within the Star Wars mythos. Her evolution from Jedi to Sith assassin to independent agent underscores the tension between fate and free will, light and dark, order and chaos. She embodies the tragic consequences of war and betrayal, but also the possibility of transformation and self-determination. Her story enriches the narrative of the Clone Wars era by adding layers of personal conflict and moral complexity to the larger galactic struggle. In summary, Asajj Ventress is a critical figure for understanding Count Dooku's legacy and the wider Star Wars mythology. Her journey reveals the harsh realities of Sith apprenticeship, the personal costs of political and ideological conflict, and the intricate interplay of loyalty and betrayal. Ventress's story offers valuable insight into Sith dynamics and enriches the exploration of themes such as power, identity, and redemption within the Star Wars saga. If you would like, I can provide similarly detailed analyses of other characters connected to Dooku or explore particular events from the Clone Wars in more depth. Count Dooku's strategic mind and leadership of the separatist movement were central to the escalation and conduct of the Clone Wars, making him one of the most influential figures in galactic history during this tumultuous period. His role as a political leader, military commander, and Sith apprentice created a unique blend of power and cunning that shaped the fate of the Republic, the Jedi Order, and the galaxy itself. Dooku's political acumen was evident in his ability to unite a diverse coalition of star systems, corporations, and factions under the banner of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, commonly known as the Separatists. Discontent with the Republic's corruption, bureaucracy, and the influence of the Jedi, many systems sought greater autonomy or outright independence. Dooku capitalized on this dissatisfaction, presenting himself as a noble and principled leader advocating for reform and sovereignty. His aristocratic background and charismatic presence helped him gain trust among influential leaders, making the Separatists a formidable political force. As the war progressed, Dooku's leadership extended beyond mere political rhetoric. He commanded vast armies of battle droids and utilized Sith-trained agents such as Asajj Ventress to carry out covert operations that destabilized Republic defenses and undermined the Jedi. His strategic brilliance was apparent in orchestrating battles and maneuvers that inflicted significant losses on the Republic forces. However, much of this conflict was orchestrated by Darth Sidious as part of a larger plan to weaken both the Jedi and the Republic from within. Dooku's leadership style combined discipline and authority with a level of pragmatism that sometimes bordered on ruthlessness. While he genuinely believed in his vision for a better order, his methods were often harsh and uncompromising. He was willing to sacrifice allies and pawns alike to achieve his goals, demonstrating a cold calculation that contrasted with his noble demeanor. This paradox made him a complex figure, both respected and feared by those who served under him. The Clone Wars themselves were a devastating conflict that reshaped the political and social fabric of the galaxy. Under Dooku's command, the Separatists engaged the Republic in battles across countless worlds, resulting in widespread destruction and loss of life. The war strained the Jedi Order, which was forced to take on military roles that conflicted with its original peacekeeping mission. Dooku's manipulation of this dynamic contributed to the erosion of the Jedi's moral authority and public support. Despite his successes, Dooku's position was always precarious, bound by his loyalty to Darth Sidious and the Sith agenda. His role as Sith apprentice required him to advance Sidious's schemes while maintaining the illusion of an independent leader. This delicate balance became increasingly difficult as Sidious's ultimate plan to replace him with Anakin Skywalker unfolded. Dooku's failure to recognize the true extent of Sidious's manipulation ultimately led to his demise. Dooku's death aboard the Invisible Hand marked the end of his direct influence but accelerated the Sith's rise to power. His passing removed a key obstacle for Sidious, allowing the Chancellor to consolidate control and transform the Republic into the Galactic Empire. The aftermath of the Clone Wars saw the Jedi Order decimated and the galaxy plunged into authoritarian rule, outcomes deeply connected to Dooku's actions and decisions. In conclusion, Count Dooku's strategic leadership of the Separatists was a defining element of the Clone Wars and the broader galactic crisis. His blend of political skill, military expertise, and Sith tutelage made him a formidable adversary whose impact reverberated through the galaxy's history. By examining his role, we gain insight into the complex interplay of ideology, ambition, and manipulation that characterized this pivotal era. If you wish, I can provide more detailed explorations of key battles, political maneuvers, or other leaders involved in the Clone Wars and their relationships with Dooku. Count Dooku's fall from the Jedi Order and transformation into Darth Tyrannus is a pivotal chapter in his life that highlights the complex motivations and internal conflicts that shaped his path to the dark side. His departure from the Jedi was not sudden, but rather the result of growing disillusionment with the Order and the Galactic Republic, which he viewed as corrupt, ineffective, and morally compromised. Exploring the reasons behind Dooku's defection reveals much about his character and the broader themes of loyalty, ideology, and power in the Star Wars universe. Dooku was once a respected Jedi Master and member of the Jedi High Council. Known for his wisdom and skill, his noble heritage and elegant demeanor set him apart from many of his peers. His commitment to the Jedi Code and the light side of the Force initially defined his identity. However, over time he became increasingly critical of the Jedi Order's involvement in politics and its perceived failure to address the Republic's corruption and decline. He saw the Jedi as enforcers of a flawed system, rather than true guardians of peace and justice. This growing dissatisfaction was compounded by personal tragedy and the political turmoil engulfing the galaxy. The Clone Wars loomed on the horizon, and the Republic appeared unable to prevent widespread conflict, and suffering. Dooku's belief in the Jedi's inability to effect meaningful change led him to question his allegiance. He sought a new path that could bring about real reform and order, even if it meant abandoning the principles he once upheld. Dooku's seduction by the dark side was facilitated by Darth Sidious, who recognized the former Jedi Master's potential. As a powerful Sith apprentice, Sidious exploited Dooku's disillusionment and ambition, offering him a vision of galactic order under Sith rule. Dooku accepted this dark alliance. Adopting the Sith name Darth Tyrannus, the transition was not merely a shift in allegiance but a profound transformation in philosophy and identity. He embraced the dark side's emphasis on power, control, and pragmatism, seeing it as a means to achieve his goals. His departure from the Jedi Order was marked by conflict and betrayal. Dooku became a symbol of rebellion against the Jedi and the Republic. Leading the separatist movement in open defiance, he recruited disaffected systems and factions to his cause, positioning himself as a liberator and reformer. Even as he advanced Sith objectives, this duality reflects the complexity of his character as both idealist and villain. Dooku's fall also underscores the tragic dimension of his story. He was once a protector of peace who became an agent of war and destruction. His journey illustrates how noble intentions can be corrupted by disillusionment and ambition. The transformation from Jedi Master to Sith Lord embodies the tension between light and dark that defines much of the Star Wars saga. Furthermore, Dooku's story invites reflection on the nature of the Jedi Order and its limitations. His criticism of the Order's dogmatism and political entanglements resonates with broader critiques of institutions that lose sight of their original purpose. Dooku's defection exposes vulnerabilities within the Jedi that ultimately contribute to their downfall. In essence, Count Dooku's fall from the Jedi and embrace of the dark side is a multifaceted narrative about loss, choice, and the search for meaning in a fractured galaxy. His transformation into Darth Tyrannus represents a turning point not only for himself but for the entire Star Wars universe. This chapter in his life enriches our understanding of the complex moral and political landscape that shapes the saga and the enduring struggle between light and dark. If you would like, I can continue with detailed accounts of his activities as a Sith Lord, or examine the philosophical implications of his choices in greater depth. Count Dooku's political influence and role as the leader of the separatist movement were instrumental in shaping the Clone Wars and the eventual collapse of the Galactic Republic. His ability to galvanize a coalition of star systems, corporate entities, and disaffected factions reflected not only his personal charisma and strategic mind, but also the widespread dissatisfaction and unrest present in the galaxy during this era. To fully grasp the significance of Dooku's political maneuvers, it is essential to analyze the historical context, his motivations, and the broader impact of his leadership on galactic events. Dooku emerged as a prominent political figure amid growing tensions within the Republic caused by corruption, bureaucratic inefficiency, and increasing militarization. The Republic's centralized government faced criticism from many systems that felt marginalized or exploited by its policies. The Jedi Order, traditionally seen as peacekeepers, was increasingly perceived as enforcers of a flawed political order rather than impartial guardians of justice. Dooku capitalized on this discontent by presenting himself as a principled opponent of corruption and a champion of self-determination. His noble lineage and reputation as a former Jedi lent him credibility among the separatists. He articulated a vision of a galaxy where systems could govern themselves without interference from a distant and compromised central authority. This message resonated with powerful corporations like the Trade Federation, Techno-Union, and Commerce Guild, whose interests aligned with weakening the Republic's control. Dooku's skillful diplomacy and negotiation forged a diverse alliance that transformed the separatists into a formidable political and military force. Under Dooku's leadership, the separatists orchestrated a widespread secession movement that plunged the galaxy into civil war. The creation of the Confederacy of Independent Systems represented a direct challenge to the Republic's legitimacy and authority. Dooku's ability to unite disparate groups with varying agendas demonstrated his political acumen and adaptability. He managed to balance the demands of corporate backers, political leaders, and military commanders while maintaining a coherent strategy against the Republic. However, Dooku's political ambitions were inseparable from his Sith identity and his role as Darth Tyrannus. The separatist movement was not merely a rebellion for independence but a key component in Darth Sidious's grand design to destabilize the Republic and eliminate the Jedi Order. From this perspective, Dooku's leadership served both his personal goals and the Sith agenda, illustrating the intersection of ideology and manipulation. The Clone Wars themselves were as much a political theater as a military conflict. Dooku's strategic use of battle droids and Sith operatives like Asajj Ventress undermined Republic efforts and prolonged the war, creating conditions that eroded public trust in the Jedi and the government. The prolonged conflict exhausted resources, devastated worlds, and sowed fear and uncertainty, all of which played into the Sith plan for galactic domination. Dooku's interactions with other key figures further reveal the complexity of his political role. His dealings with Chancellor Palpatine, who secretly controlled both sides of the war, were marked by a mixture of cooperation, rivalry, and deception. Dooku's failure to perceive Palpatine's ultimate ambitions reflects the limits of his power and insight. Despite his formidable skills, Dooku was ultimately a pawn in a larger game that he could not fully control. In examining Dooku's political influence, one must also consider the consequences of his actions for the galaxy's future. The war he helped ignite led to the destruction of the Jedi Order, the rise of the Galactic Empire, and the entrenchment of authoritarian rule. These outcomes, while aligned with Sith objectives, represented a profound upheaval that reshaped galactic history and left lasting scars. In summary, Count Dooku's political leadership of the separatists was a defining force in the Clone Wars and the collapse of the Republic. His ability to unite disparate factions, exploit widespread dissatisfaction, and further Sith ambitions underscores his significance as both a visionary and a manipulator. The legacy of his political maneuvers offers valuable insights into the dynamics of power, rebellion, and control in the Star Wars saga. If you are interested, I can provide detailed analyses of the key battles he led or explore the relationships between the separatist leadership and other galactic powers in more depth. Count Dooku's relationship with Darth Sidious was foundational to his role in galactic events and his personal journey from Jedi Master to Sith Lord. The complex dynamics between Master and Apprentice reveal much about Sith philosophy, deception, and ambition. Their alliance was marked by mutual benefit, manipulation, and ultimately betrayal, reflecting the dark side's inherently treacherous nature. Examining their interactions provides key insights into the broader machinations that shaped the Clone Wars and the rise of the Galactic Empire. Darth Sidious, known publicly as Chancellor Palpatine, was the mastermind behind the Sith's long-term plan to overthrow the Republic and eliminate the Jedi Order. Dooku's recruitment into the Sith was a critical step in this grand strategy. Sidious recognized Dooku's disillusionment with the Jedi and the Republic and offered him power and purpose through the dark side. Dooku's acceptance of the Sith mantle as Darth Tyrannus solidified his commitment to Sidious's vision but also bound him to a path of subservience within Sith hierarchy. Their relationship was characterized by a blend of respect and manipulation. Sidious valued Dooku's strength, intelligence, and leadership abilities and entrusted him with commanding the separatist movement to destabilize the Republic. However, Sidious maintained ultimate control, using Dooku as a pawn to advance his own ambitions while keeping him in the dark about the full extent of his plans. This dynamic exemplifies the Sith principle that the apprentice must eventually be destroyed by the master to achieve ultimate power. Dooku's role as Sidious's apprentice required him to carry out complex schemes that furthered Sith goals while maintaining the facade of a legitimate political leader. His leadership of the separatists served Sidious's objective to foment war and weaken the Republic from within. The conflict drained the Republic's resources, eroded public trust in the Jedi, and set the stage for Sidious to declare himself emperor. The war was both a political and spiritual battlefield where the Sith manipulated events to eliminate their enemies. Despite his power and position, Dooku was aware of the precariousness of his status. His relationship with Sidious was marked by caution and underlying tension. As he understood the Sith tradition of betrayal, he sought to consolidate his own power and influence within the separatist movement, sometimes acting with a degree of autonomy, but ultimately remained subordinate to Sidious's will. The Master's control limited Dooku's freedom and foreshadowed his eventual downfall. The betrayal of Dooku by Sidious is one of the most dramatic moments in the Clone Wars narrative. When Sidious ordered Anakin Skywalker to kill Dooku aboard the Invisible Hand, it marked the final act in the Sith apprentice succession. In this moment, Dooku's fate was sealed by the very master he served, illustrating the ruthless and unforgiving nature of Sith relationships. The scene underscores the Sith cycle of power, where loyalty is temporary and ambition is always met with treachery. Dooku's acceptance of his role in this cycle reflects the complex interplay between ambition and fatalism within Sith ideology. He was a willing participant in his own betrayal, aware that the path to power required sacrifice and deception. His character embodies the tragic dimension of the Sith experience, a constant struggle for dominance ultimately leading to destruction. Their relationship also had profound implications for other key characters and the broader storyline. The manipulation of Dooku facilitated Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader by creating circumstances that pushed Anakin toward the dark side. The war they engineered destroyed the Jedi Order's unity and set the stage for the rise of authoritarian rule. The personal and political consequences of their alliance reverberated throughout the galaxy. In conclusion, the dynamic between Count Dooku and Darth Sidious is central to understanding the Sith's influence on galactic history and the tragic outcomes of the Clone Wars. Their relationship exemplifies themes of power, betrayal, and manipulation that define Sith philosophy and illuminate the dark undercurrents driving the Star Wars saga. Dooku's story as Sidious's apprentice reveals the costs of ambition and the inevitable cycle of Sith treachery. If you would like, I can offer further analysis on how this relationship influenced key battles or explore the Sith's impact on the Jedi Order in more detail.